Salam and welcome back to SomaliDispatch.com and to our weekly program, Dispatches. My name is Abdulqadir Goulet. This week on Dispatches, we will be discussing President Bihi's visit to the U.S., China donating military equipment to Somalia, and Puntland President's announcement that he is running for Villa Somalia. This week, we will be joined to discuss those issues by Fathia Gule and Dr. Noor Hassan. Fathia is a MSc International Conflicts Resolution, a human rights advocate and a GBV, and Dr. Noor is an academic based in London and is a East Africa political analyst. I began our conversation by asking Fathia to give us her assessment on President Bihi's visit to the United States.
Thank you, Abdulqadir, for having me again on your show. And it's a great, really, opportunity to discuss a really important topic. And I'm really pleased to be here to kind of give an insight into this. I mean, I call it historic visit, really, for President Bihi. As you know, Somaliland is seeking independence. It's seeking self-determination. It has been seeking that for the last 30 years. It's a significant step that has been taken in terms of foreign relation, as significant as the bilateral relationships that with Taiwan. So for Somaliland, this is great news. President Bihi was invited by Heritage Foundation. He was there to meet senators, and he was there to have to present Somaliland to the world and Somaliland's needs and Somaliland's challenges and what they have accomplished. And in terms of the meeting, really, that was most highlighted to me the importance of Somaliland's aspiration to become independent, right, as well, because they have managed to, for the last 30 years, to secure their borders, to make their economy as successful as can be. As you know, they have been restricted by the international community in terms of their access to the financial market. I mean, the World Bank, IMF will not be lending you loans or grants because you are not recognized and you are not part of the SWIFT system. So this step that President Bihi took to go to the US, it had a dual sort of reasons. I mean, it was to introduce Somaliland to cement relationship with the US on a one-to-one basis. And that has happened with the Somaliland Partnership Act, introduced by the senators. So that's going through this week, where there will be discussion about this new step. And in terms of the presidency for Bihi, it looks positive, because you know he's up for re-election in November the 13th. Kulmiya Party has been in power for the last 12 years in Somaliland. And as President Silanyo left quite a legacy in 2016, we have challenges. We have internal domestic challenges that needs to be reviewed, because there are issues with journalists having the rights to express themselves. There are issues with women representation. There are issues with, you know, in terms of the environment. We have a drought issue that needs definitely an attention from the government as their next, you know, policy that they need to come up with. And obviously we have the biggest, you know, the biggest election that you can describe in November, which is the presidential election. We had our parliamentary election last year in May, which was successful, free and fair elections, one person, one vote. And that's the very basis of democracy. And it's right. A democracy that is envied by many African countries. And you can see the excitements of the diaspora Somalilanders, that, you know, and also the people of Somaliland who are watching this quite closely.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Fathia. Dr. Noor, welcome to the Dispatches weekly program. If you can give us your take on the other side of Fathia's explanations of what the visit means by the president of Somaliland. What does this visit mean for the broader context of the Horn of Africa and for Somalis in general?
Thank you very much, brother Abdulqadir, and thank you, sister Fathia, to having me on the show. I think largely I agree with Fathia, but I want to say something about the timing of Bihi's visit to the United States. I think the timing is significant for two reasons. One is for what I call domestic reasons. Another one is international audience. If I start with the domestic reasons, I think, as you know, the Somalia general election is although it has been a very symbolic and unorganized and sort of marred with corruption and horse trading, political horse trading, I think we are very close to the finishing line. And I think Bihi to go to the States at this time signifies one thing, and that is to say the United States, who were also very vocal against what they call the spoilers of political spoilers in Mogadishu, to say, look, we as Fathia said, we've had elections on deadlines, we have had no problems, we're more or less democratic, peaceful, and we're doing very well. And look what's happening in Mogadishu. Mogadishu is in shambles. They're very corrupt. We have a president in Somalia who has had his term extended unlawfully. And there's a problem going on. And I think, God forbid, but there's a worse to come. So that was probably an opportunity. And I think the timing was very good. And Americans perhaps might have listened to him to say, yeah, I think that there's a point in there. Remember, Secretary Blinken was quite vocal on the Somalia's election. He was in fact threatening what he called the spoilers with sanctions, travel visas, and perhaps maybe asset risk. And therefore, Bihi would have had probably behind the scenes a bit of a success from that angle, I think, to showcase Somaliland. The second one, I think, is international because, as we know, Fathia is aware of that. I'm sure we have a war now going on in Europe. And I think the significance of Russia's invasion into Ukraine perhaps might change the calculus in terms of the so-called Cold War coming back. For Bihi, I'm sure, and his delegation would have had probably spoken to some lobbyists at Heritage and other friends to push the idea of telling the Americans that, look, Chinese are now perhaps maybe behind the scenes trying to help the Russians. I'm sure they're not saying that, but this is my own kind of reading the reading of the situation. So therefore, Somaliland might be ideally a place where the Americans can come and count on in terms of democratic nations in that part of the world. So that probably might have also had some kind of international audience. So I think my emphasis is that the timing was quite crucial. I don't know whether this was planned in advance or whether this was a coincidence. I'm not quite sure.
Right. I appreciate that, Dr. Noor. If I may stay with you, Somaliland's diplomatic relationship with Taiwan also upset China and Somalia alike, and is seen as maybe the basis for the visit as well. One of the things that Somaliland delegation with their president were pushing. What role did that relationship play in the visit and in the relationship that Somaliland is trying to rehash with the States, with perhaps asking for a dual engagement, what they used to call?
I think it might have played again significantly because remember, the Americans have been warning the Chinese government not to support the illegal invasion of Russia into Ukraine. China, of course, denied that allegation, but initially, I was one of the people who thought Somaliland, when they started bilateral relationship with Taiwan, was some kind of a strategic volley. I think strategic error. That's what I thought, and I think majority of us thought that because here we have China, who is the second largest economy in the world, the most invested country in Africa. Has the second most strongest army in the world, rising, and next door, stone throw from Somaliland in Djibouti has a military base, and then all of a sudden, Bihi and his administration tried to annoy them by signing some kind of bilateral agreement with Taiwan. which we know where China stands. I mean, Taiwan is still not officially recognized. Actually, the Americans have not actually officially recognized Taiwan as a state, but they know that, but they've never said anything about it. And therefore, for Somaliland, a tiny country which is not even recognized, still to start and kind of a bit its power against the mighty of China, I thought was strategic error. But I think as we move in and as we move into this catastrophic war that's happening in Europe now, it might well turn out to be a positive sort of adventure, if you like. So I think in the long term, Bihi and his administration and Somaliland case and Somaliland political class perhaps might use this to entice more from the Americans and from the British to say, look, Berbera is there. You can use if you want to, but why not look at us and so on and so forth. So it might be a positive card for them.
Right. Fathia, Somaliland has responded to the Chinese government this week, donating military equipment to Somalia. What does that move mean for the Horn in general, and in specifically the dispute between Somalia and Somaliland?
Well, it's a great question. Now, given that the Chinese have donated those equipments that you described, which are so quote unquote military equipments, they trucks and they on the outset it looks to be that China is donating military equipment, but Somalia is actually under arms embargo. That's a fact, and it has not been lifted. So that's definitely for sure something that doesn't need to raise eyebrows. And the equipment that they have donated, they could say it's to safeguard, it's to assist Somalia with its fight against Al-Shabaab, and that might be taken negatively by Somaliland, but it hasn't happened, because for 30 years Somalia never fought militarily to perhaps invade Somaliland, and if they attempt that, it's almost a regression to the 1990s anarchy and chaos that we have come so far to avoid. So going back to Somaliland, there is a moment in history where you have to decide what you want to do, how do you want to go forward, what policy you want to implement, what foreign relationships do you want to have with your neighbors. And Somalia and Somaliland can coexist as a two-state system, just like Djibouti, just like Kenya, just like Ethiopia, just like Eritrea. They can have that kind of relationship that's built on peace and security.
I appreciate that. Dr. Noor, your take on China's military equipment donation to Somalia and what that means for Somalis in the Horn of Africa.
Well, I haven't seen the brief yet. I think I've heard through social media. I haven't really confirmed exactly what has been donated from China to Somalia. But as Fathia said rightly, Somalia is still under arms embargo, United Nations arms embargo, and I think Chinese, as one of the key 5 Security Council members, will not perhaps break that law. So I think it might well be some kind of consignment support, like Turkish and Qataris and United Arab Emirates and whatever they do. So I don't think there's as Fateh said, there won't be any problems. And I think the political class in Hargeisa should not really lose any sleep on that. I think Somalia is far away from becoming a hegemony or hegemonic power with the fear that they might invade Somaliland. But I think Somaliland, we can talk about the question of Somaliland. I think Somaliland, I always said that the issue of Somaliland is one thing. One is we know Somaliland has been seeking independence from Somalia to divorce Somalia for the last 3 decades or so. I think 31 years old, 31, something like that, 31 or 30 years. And I think I always blame, I am, I mean, in my view, I always support the unity of Somalia, but I always also admire the aspirations of Somalilanders to seek their own country and to say whatever they want. They're free people. They can decide whatever they want. And in fact, there's always a case for Somalilanders to say, look, this is our case to divorce Somalia, to be not to be part of Somalia any longer. But I think also, I always blamed the Somali South's political class. I think Somaliland has always been dismissed. I wrote a small note on my Facebook when that motion got through the British Parliament, and there was a debate in the House of Commons and about Somaliland's opportunity to be given, just the British government to look into this case, and there was a lot of floodgate opened on social media. People were just throwing things, and I say, look, this is the failure of the Somalis political class. It's not Somalilanders. They should have spoken to Somaliland, addressed the issue of Somaliland's concerns, the grievances, all those things in a manner that is conducive to both parties, and probably would have come some kind of a solution. I don't think 10 years ago Somaliland would probably listen to some kind of meeting Somalia in the middle, probably maybe a confederation or a Swiss-like styled, but now I think it seems to me, because of 30 years, there's a new generation of Somalilanders who might not even remember what Somalia was. So I think there's always a debate, and I always advise people, and I always talk about constructive debate between Somalia and Somaliland. Foreigners can stay, we can talk, we're all Somalis, we can agree things, but I always oppose the idea of dismissing Somaliland's case. People in Mogadishu and Somali political class tend to dismiss out of hand. You can see on Twitter, on social media, they just dismiss. You cannot keep dismissing it. And at one point, the international community might, out of nowhere, really admit Somaliland into the independent world of countries.
Right. On our final topic here today, thank you for thank you and thank you, Fathia, for coming and sharing your insights with us this week. But as we all know, Somalia's parliamentary elections are heading towards conclusion, and with the major announcement from Puntland's president, Mr. Somalia Deni, and his forte into federal politics and actually declaring his candidacy into Somalia. Your take, Fathia, first, then Dr. Noor.
What's happening with Deni and his candidacy, that he basically, he hasn't said what's on his manifesto. He hasn't said what the plans are for Somalia, but you can see the aspiration.
He did declare.
He declared it. Yes, he said, I want to become president, but we could all say we all want to become president. But you have to have a track record of performance, and his track record as a president of Puntland, which is a federal member state. I mean, what would stop the other federal member states to also put their names forward? And can you be a federal member state and also a candidate for the federal government of Somalia? And I mean, there is something odd that's happening right there. And if you look at the presidency of Deni, with all due respects to him, you have to look at what has he done for Puntland since his presidency. Is the economy doing well? Are there social issues? Has there been, for instance, the embarrassing, I have to mention one security issue that Somaliland doesn't have. Puntland had in Bosaso 400 prisoners, Al-Shabaab, that were, the prison, that were in prison, that were let out, and that was unprecedented for Puntland. There are assassinations that are happening. Nobody knows who's in terms of security. There is an internal conflict. There is an internal disagreement between Garowe and Bosaso, and these things are not really enthusing trust, into Deni's candidacy for, becoming the president of Somalia.
Thank you, Fathia. Dr. Noor, what is, President Deni says that his campaign is solely based on anybody but Farmajo for Somalia's presidency. That's not quite the manifesto that you would expect from or a campaign headline for a candidacy. What do you make of his candidacy, and what does it mean for Somalia moving forward?
I think putting aside his track record in Puntland, as Fathir explained, rightly, the announcement of Deni's candidacy, I think, is a big thing in my opinion. I think he was expected actually to announce a few months ago, but obviously now it's confirmed. I think this will change the calculus. I think this will change in terms of calculus, and I think it might well be, as I said on my Facebook, I think it might well be advantage to anti-Farmajo camp. I think as we've seen MB selection, and there's still a few out there to be completed, the process has not been smooth. It has not been free from corruption. It was marred with corruption, with political horse trading. And I don't think the presidential election where Deni will also be a candidate will be different. I think, God forbid, worse might yet to come. The reason why I think the calculus will change is that, as you know, Somalia Somali politics is based on clan. It's a clan allocation. And those 4.4, there's only two clans who really compete for the premiership and the presidency. We know that. And we know who was in the presidency for the last 4 years and who they belong to. But what will happen is Deni will bring in new dynamics, I think, to this formula. I think if you like, the Mogadishu, without mentioning the clan names, but there's nothing wrong to mention actually the clan names, Mogadishu political elites are fed up with Farmajo. And I think anyone who can perhaps dislodge Farmajo or can support them, they will openly support. So I don't see any reason why Mogadishu's and any other candidates will, if push come to shove, come to the rescue to Deni's. Deni's got, of course, as Fatia says, there's a lot of domestic issues. He's got a lot of problems, but this is Somalia. Look at Farmajo, what Farmajo did for the last 5 years. Nobody looks at track records. Nobody looks at what a person's done. And there's no merit in Somali politics. It's about all clan. It's about all ephemeral interest. It's all about today, not tomorrow. So perhaps Somaliland can teach Somalia in terms of strategic and looking into the future. But I think then it will create a new dynamics into this institutionalized of X clan gets the presidency, Y clans gets premiership. So I think Farmajo and his colleagues are now quite scared about the candidacy. Going back to when he said his main intention is to dislodge Farmajo from the Villa Somalia, I think that was very a short-sighted statement to say at the list, because he wouldn't be using that kind of thing. But again, it's politics. Nobody will remember. Actually, nobody said on social media. So people can get away with it. Farmajo got away with big problems. He said all sorts of things. Although he's not as well spoken as Deni, he has always said he did quite a serious stuff to Somali national interest. But nobody talks about that. So I think it's quite exciting. I hope the election will conclude peacefully. I doubt very much. It will take a while. I think there might be problems. But Deni's coming in to the ring. I think will add some kind of an excitement for us.
Right. At the risk of editorializing, there's this new phenomenon in politics, and especially when it comes to elections, there tends to be, and Somalia is not immune to this apparently, there tends to be people voting or voters going against what they don't like instead of voting for what they like. And I think that is something to watch for in Somalia as well as we head to the presidential elections. I can't thank you enough, Fadhiya and Dr. Noor, for coming on and explaining and sharing your insights with us. And I hopefully, just like Fadhiya does from time to time, Dr. Noor can join us and further have discussions with us on these and other items, to shed light on where we sit on things. Thank you so much again, and have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.